I was there. I stood at the back of the crowd with my head bowed, afraid to look, but afraid to turn away. You see, I had been following Jesus for a while. Not publicly, of course. I had a reputation to keep. I was a wealthy man. I had several businesses. But more than that, people knew me because I was a member of the Sanhedrin, the ruling council of elders who settled disputes for all of the Jews. I guess it all happened one day after the Sanhedrin had adjourned. My friend Nicodemus pulled me aside in the hallway and in low tones told me that he wanted me to go outside of the city with him to hear a new rabbi. I remember Nicodemus looking back and forth, and then he whispered to me, "I think he might be the Messiah." Oh, I was incredulous. The Messiah? Really? You have to understand that there had been so many of these so-called messiahs and would-be revolutionaries. I'm thinking of Judas, the Galilean, Simon of Perea, Barabbas. Each of them claimed to offer hope. They took up swords. They used the words of the prophets as their rallying cry. Each one was taken down by the Romans and imprisoned, or worse. Nicodemus led me out into the countryside where we saw a man sitting on a hillside teaching a group of farmers and shepherds while their children played and climbed on his knee. He was telling stories, simple stories about the kingdom of God. He said things like, the kingdom of God is like a treasure hidden in a field. Or it was like yeast that caused dough to rise. Or like a tiny seed that would grow into a big tree so that birds of the air could nest in its branches. I have to say that I barely understood what those stories meant. But something inside of me came alive when he spoke. And I began to dream of what this kingdom could be like. After that, Nicodemus and I went out to see him every time we could. He told a story about a merchant. This man bought and sold pearls. One day the merchant saw a pearl, bigger and brighter and more beautiful than he had ever seen. He went and sold all that he had, everything, so he could buy this one precious pearl because he recognized how incredibly valuable it was. I felt like that. I felt like that. I was a successful businessman. I owned many businesses, 2 homes, and a vineyard. My wife and children lived very comfortable lives. I knew that I would trade it all for that kingdom of God. I suppose you know what happens next. It was the first day of Passover. I and the 68 other members of the Sanhedrin were summoned at dawn for a special trial. At first light, the high priests and the scribes brought this same rabbi, Jesus, to us. Oh, they were angry. They were spitting hatred and vile accusations of blasphemy against him. They wanted him dead. That Jesus, the teacher, who only a few weeks before was sitting comfortably on a hillside, was standing before us, bloodied and bruised, with his hands tied behind his back. Somebody said to him, "So, are you the Messiah?" He calmly answered, "If I told you, you would not believe. But from here on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." Well, hearing that, somebody at the back of the room shouted, "So do you mean to say that you are the Son of God?" Jesus calmly responded. He said, "You say that I am." Well, at that, the members of the Sanhedrin were furious as the priests and scribes, and now they were demanding the death penalty for this blasphemy. This was my moment to speak, to demand a fair trial according to our laws, and to remind the council of the legal requirements for fair representation and a minimum 2-day trial. But my words were drowned out. The crowd grabbed Jesus and pulled him out of the chamber. They shouted that they were going to take him to the governor's house. And I sat down with my head between my hands. Across the room, Nicodemus was weeping, tearing at his clothes. We were supposed to be administering justice. Now we were sentencing the Son of God, God's anointed one, to death. So yes, I was there. I saw him crucified. And I wondered the whole time if I could have done more. Should I have asked some of the members of the Sanhedrin to come and hear him teaching? Should I have stood between him and the temple guard at the trial? A soldier called out that Jesus had died sooner than expected. And I knew what I had to do. I went to Pilate and asked if I may bury the body of Jesus. I wanted permission, and he gave it. I knew of a plot, a garden, that had recently been made for a family tomb, and I went to the owners to buy it. I told them, I must have it today. I will pay any price. Now, I'm a businessman, but I knew that was not the time to haggle over price. And I paid many times more than what that property cost. I sent servants to take the body of Jesus to the tomb, and I met Nicodemus there. We washed the dried blood and spit from his body. We did it carefully, gently, slowly. But we thought that his open wounds could still feel the shock of cold water. We had listened to him for so long, but from a distance. We were afraid to get too close for fear that the crowd would recognize us. Now, we were right here, face to face, with our hands on his broken body. Some of the women that we had seen with Jesus had come to the tomb as well. And along with them, we began to wrap his body in new linen, applying the myrrh and the aloes with each layer. And we wept. Nicodemus and I wept. These two disgraced elders of Israel, we wept. And we wept with the women, as though this was our father and our brother. We wept because of the loss of a good man and a great teacher. We wept because he was more than a teacher. He was God's anointed one. He had come to save his people. He had come to save the world. And we anointed him with our tears and myrrh and aloe. Yes. We anointed him with our tears because the world was not worthy of him. As we left the tomb, I remembered the words of the prophet Isaiah. For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people, he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth.